100 movies every Catholic should see. Today, on The Simple Truth, we consecrate everything to the Sacred Heart of Jesus through the Immaculate Heart of Mary and the pure, strong, chaste heart of St. Joseph. I'm your host, Jim Havens, and our guest today is Samuel Morales, a graduate of Christendom College and one of the men behind the online movie review project, 100 Catholic Movies, featuring the 100 movies every Catholic should see. You can find it over at 100catholicmovies.substack.com. That's 100catholicmovies.substack.com. Samuel Morales, welcome to The Simple Truth. How are you today?
Doing great. Happy to be here.
Excellent. Yeah, I always love diving into talking about films, film history, movies from a Catholic perspective, Catholic worldview. And so really excited to have Samuel on today to talk with us. But I do want to let you know before we get started, if you enjoy listening to The Simple Truth and the other great shows on the Station of the Cross, please support our 2025 Fall Appeal. Many easy ways to donate. You can simply return the envelope from our recent mailing or go to thestationofthecross.com or use the iCatholic Radio mobile app. You can also call in your weekly, your pledge any weekday, 8 to 5 p.m. Eastern at 1-877-711-8500. We do thank you for your generous support. So diving in to this, Samuel, introduce us to you a little bit. What is your backstory? What leads you up to this project, 100catholicmovies.substack.com, and the history of how this all got going?
Yeah, so I've loved movies for a while. When I was a kid, I started picking up I just love to read. And my first fixation was dinosaurs. That was a long time ago. And then gradually, basically when I really liked dinosaurs, I would pick up every single book that I could read about them. And then when I started watching with Lord of the Rings, and my dad was showing, my family always watched great movies, but when I became particularly interested in how movies are made, I started picking up every single book that I could. And from then on, I just developed this love of filmmaking and movies and cinema. And then in college, I got the app Letterboxd, which allowed me to write movie reviews and share them with my friends, which was really fun. And then I had some friends who said wow, your reviews, you should get them more widespread and published. So I knew I wanted to write, and I knew I wanted to write about movies, especially just to have my own site where I could review films. And then I actually lived in Rome for a year, working for Christendom College, and I had a lot of time on my hands. And I was like, this is the time that I can do something and write, and I wanted to write some sort of book. So I had the idea of a book called 100 Movies Every Catholic Should See. Because my dad had got me a poster for a birthday present while I was over there that had the IMDb top 100. So that was just every day I'd see that. So that's how I got the idea. And so I pitched it to my friends because I was like, a bunch of us went to Christendom. We love to write. And I was like, we could write something in no time if we divvy up 100 slots among even 5 or 10 of us. And then so I pitched the idea. It didn't necessarily gain traction immediately until my friend Joe Wilson, who's now my co-partner in this, reached out and said, love your idea. I think we should do it as a blog first and post every day for 100 weeks and then release it as a book. So the book is still pending, but we did complete our list of 100 films recently this year. So that was a big milestone for us. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun, and it's gained a lot of traction, which has been really cool.
Excellent. Yes. Again, folks can find it over at 100catholicmovies.substack.com. And so, before we even get started with the list and your work on this, what is your view, I guess, as a well-formed Catholic man? You're a graduate of Christendom, on why do we like movies so much? Really, I guess, why do we like stories so much? You talk about reading stories well told, whether we're reading them or watching them on film, but I guess something particular about the visual medium. Any thoughts, any insights for us there?
Yeah, so cinema is one of the unique art forms that can reflect our life experience as it really is. Now, there's 2 takes on that. You can show things that are fantastical, but you can also show stories of humanity as we are. There are great films like 12 Angry Men, A Man for All Seasons, that are just about ordinary men doing heroic things. I think Roger Ebert was the one who called movies empathy machines, in the sense that they allow us to connect with, like, understand each other better as humans, with our flaws, as with our sin and our virtue. So that speaks overall to the importance of stories. But film does it in a way that painting or in literature, they all have their own ways of telling stories. But it does it in a way that can show things like, let's say, Lord of the Rings, that can show the fantastical and the otherworldly, but also just capture time in a unique way that even a still photo does in its own way, in a beautiful way, but is able to really show, to really show the passage of time, and to show a mirror to ourselves as we really are, and how we look, and to our everyday lives. So there are many films on our list that do show smaller human stories, and some that show the bigger fantastical that only cinema can capture.
Emil Morales is with us, 100catholicmovies.substack.com. When it comes to the list, so you wrote it over a fairly long period of time, one per week for 100 weeks. But was there a sense of a criteria for the list as you were going to be selecting titles? What was the criteria that you were using?
Yeah, so we took some inspiration from the Vatican film list, because there are some films on the list, and it's divided up, that are explicitly like about virtue. Some films that are picked mainly for aesthetic purposes or for history purposes. So we wanted a mix of films that were not just saint movies, although we highlight a lot of great saint movies and movies by Catholic filmmakers, but also films that still reflect the true, the good, and the beautiful in their own right. So we have films like A Man for All Seasons, The Reluctant Saint, which is one of my favorite movies ever, about Joseph Cupertino. But we also have films like Spider-Man 2, Lord of the Rings, Star Wars on there. So initially, it really was like, what between me and my friend Joe and some of the early writers, like my friend Steven, was like, what are the films that we love? Why do we love them? What films do we want to share with others? And so there was a mix of films that like the first film I wrote on was The Tree of Life. That's my all-time favorite film. And that's a film that has a lot going on theologically and philosophically. And my friend Joe, his first pick was A Man for All Seasons. That's the first pick, and that has become like the centerpiece, like almost like the logo for our Substack now. So eventually, we towards the end, we set, me, my friend Joe, and then my friend Cameron, who came aboard, we like hard locked the last 50 or 40. And then we were a lot more intentional with like, okay, like we've heard like, here are some like great films from this era. Oh, we haven't really covered like the 20s and 30s, so we should get some films in there. But mainly the criteria come down, they have to be true, good, and beautiful, and not be, of course, not be offensive for a Catholic to watch. So there's a diverse array of films that are for families, maybe some that are a bit more mature. Like we have some Andrei Tarkovsky films, which those are a bit headier, I guess, not necessarily as accessible, but really still truly great films. So yeah, we got a better sense for what we wanted for the list as we went on. And now we've even refined it even more. Now we're doing different series of 5 filmmakers at a time. Now we're moving into different genres. So we're being we've gotten more and more intentional with our list as we've gone on. I also should say, for first-time viewers who do discover the list, it's not ranked. And we've had many different people come to our list thinking it's ranked. It's 100 movies every Catholic should see. It's not a ranked list of the 100 greatest movies of all time. So it's a list of 100 movies, and now we're doing a list of 100 more movies.
Yes, yeah, that's a very important clarification. And yeah, one more clarification too as we get into it, and that is so different people are going to have a different sense of what is appropriate or what isn't. Where do you draw the line? This is also not something like Common Sense Media or Plugged In, where you're writing about these are the objectionable things, these are the positive things. You're really just giving really an all around review from a Catholic worldview for these films, correct?
Yeah, yes, I would say that's correct. Yeah, we have some films. I'd say most of the films actually are pretty family friendly, but when we do have some stuff, and we have some R-rated stuff on there, not just The Passion of the Christ, but that is one of them that we have on there. We do put content warnings where it is appropriate, but we usually it's stuff like, I'm trying to think, like we have the Godfather trilogy as one installment on there, and we do have the content warnings on there. But that's a film that has a lot that is edifying, but that has maybe like one or two scenes that you should skip, but overall like has a lot to say on the nature of sin, and it's a tragedy at the end of the day, and it's a beautiful and a well-made tragedy. Yeah.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And yeah, just the character study, even in the first Godfather, of Michael Corleone, Al Pacino's character. Wow. I mean, one of the best unfoldings of a character, now going in the wrong direction, sadly, kind of from light to dark. But to see how that all unfolds and how that can unfold in the life of a person. So to be able to reflect on that in a way where you can learn a lot from it without having to actually go through it yourself. A lot there. We're going to get back with Samuel Morales in just a moment. 100catholicmovies.substack.com. We'll be right back. Stay tuned. Welcome back to The Simple Truth. Jim Havens here with our guest today, Samuel Morales, of the 100 movies every Catholic should see. That's the list. The whole project, 100 Catholic Movies, you can find over at 100catholicmovies.substack.com. And as Samuel mentioned in the last segment, well over 100 Catholic movies. You can find great reviews over there on that website as well. So let's start going down the list a little bit. As I was sort of engaging with the list, so I noticed, I immediately start to notice, okay, what have I seen? What have I not seen? And also I'm going to ask you in a little bit about some of your favorite family-friendly films that you could recommend for us, maybe, that we haven't heard of before, that most people maybe aren't aware of. I think that will be helpful to many. But that's kind of what I was looking for on Saturday. All right, what can I pop on with the kids here? I have some extra time with some of the kids, and so we went with what I had never even heard of before. Goodbye, Mr. Chips, which is one of the early reviews that you did. Now, I have to say, it was interesting. There were some interesting parts, and like all films that are decent, a lot of it depends on, even like all books, right? With young people, depending, you want it to be age appropriate, and when young people are engaging with these mediums, you want to have a good guide that can help them to make sense of what's going on and just help them to form the right view of things and make sure they don't take away kind of the wrong idea. So I found myself, kind of pausing the film in different places and talking with the kids about it. We actually didn't end up finishing the film. So we got about halfway through, and there were other things going on, and some of the boys were not into this. But I would say this was an interesting study. What would have been good, I think, for maybe like high school age students to be able to watch this and talk about it, really about relationships. I mean, there's a whole education theme here, but then there's also a lot about, I mean, it went down a road I wasn't expecting, which was sort of a reflection on romantic relationships between men and women, and how how these kind of function in a way that can be noble and good versus the worldly pull that might be trying to take things in a different direction. Again, I don't know how this story ends, but it was interesting. Again, I had never seen this before, from 1969, Goodbye, Mr. Chips. Was this one, Samuel, that you put on the list, that you reviewed yourself? Anything you want to say about this film?
No. This was my friend Danny. This was a pretty influential film for him. This was one of this was during the stage where we were like, please, like we had like a group of 4 or 5 of us, and we're like, okay, we're just gonna pick like a foundational film for us. So I've actually not seen it. If if you would recommend against it, that would be good to know. But as far as I know, amongst our friends, like, who have seen it, they've all recommended it. And I enjoyed Danny's write up of it. Thank you for your frank thoughts on it.
No, I wouldn't necessarily recommend against it. Maybe not. Sure. I mean, this is not the purpose of the list, that all of these films are going to be the best selections for sit down family time. Some will work for that and some won't. This one, I would say, you're looking at a certain period. I mean, when it comes to film history, the late 60s are a very interesting period of film history. 1969, there's a lot going on in filmmaking in America, and to kind of put this into that context, very interesting. I think this would have probably been a very wholesome film of the time in a certain way. I don't know that it holds up necessarily that way entirely, but I do think there are, very interesting themes that with older children, I think my older girls were very interested in this. Once you get into the romantic relationship theme with, I think, my 12-year-old boy, he's kind of checking out, and certainly my 10-year-old boy is like, well, I don't want to watch this, but I thought, very interesting. And that's what's great about movies, especially a good review where it's somebody who this has been an influential film in their life. I remember I had a film teacher in college who told this wonderful story. He showed us Singing in the Rain. I don't think I had ever seen it at the time. We watched that, and he talked about this story about how when he was a boy, he went to the movie theater and he saw this film, Singing in the Rain, and the scene where Gene Kelly is singing in the rain, something about that scene struck him, even as a young boy at the movies by himself, that he stayed and he watched it again just to see that scene again, that something had struck him so deeply. And there is such a joy in that scene. It's probably what struck him. But film has that power. It can really move us in deep ways, be very influential at certain points in our lives. Is there any film on the list that you would say kind of works that way for you?
Yeah. Mr. Smith Goes to Washington is for sure one of them. And that's to your earlier question about what films on the list are that I would recommend to families. That is one of them. And that's like a movie my family watches every year. Just a powerful film about, if you haven't never seen it, just Jimmy Stewart as this young congressman who gets appointed to a seat to represent his state. But through unbeknownst to him, very corrupt means, they put him there, they prop him up sort of as a stooge who will do anything, who's naive, who's this grown up Boy Scout. And then he actually gets there and he actually starts to make waves. And then it's Jimmy Stewart versus the great political machine. Powerful film about perseverance that is just so well done. It's done by Frank Capra, who was a Catholic, who also did It's a Wonderful Life. Who just had these films that were about America, which he loved very much, but also you're usually just about good men who are fighting against sin and corruption. Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, perfectly family friendly, and just an all around enjoyable film. Mr. Smith Goes to Washington is definitely an example, along with other great films like 12 Angry Men. That one might be for maybe kids who are a little bit more mature, but content wise, it is completely clean. It just deals with the heavy subject of this boy who is on trial for murder. And then Henry Fonda plays juror number 8. And everyone else thinks he's the boy's guilty, and he says, "Hold on, I don't think we ever got like we need to actually talk about this and go through all the evidence because I'm not exactly sure that this boy did it." Which leads to this just powerful drama that's all set in one room, the entire film. So those are two definite examples of films that show civic virtue and can be used to that are entertaining, but also can be used to educate virtues for young children.
Yeah, Samuel Morales is with us, 100catholicmovies.substack.com. Yeah, I love Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. The moment that he arrives in D.C. for the first time, and again, just such a joy to be in D.C. and to be seeing all the historic monuments and realizing, okay, this is where there's so much history has taken place, and seeing Congress and the whole thing. And there's a lot in Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, and also I do think that you have some great selections there, and I do want to get into your best family films. 12 Angry Men, I do just want to say, I know, Samuel, you and I were talking before the show about Triumph of the Heart, which is out. If you can, anybody can see it at their local theater. If you can find it playing, please go see it, about St. Maximilian Kolbe. Outstanding film. And in fact, if you missed this interview, when I interviewed the director, I do want to recommend that if you love 12 Angry Men, that the director did point out that it was one of the major influences for him in creating this film, Triumph of the Heart. And I think you'll realize why when you watch it, but it's a very interesting thing to consider as you watch the film. So there's that. But let's get into anything on the list that jumps out to you as something that would be terrific for a family sit down. And I think Mr. Smith Goes to Washington and 12 Angry Men do work pretty well that way. I've shown them both to my children, and 12 Angry Men, we have it and they watch it over and over again. It's one of their favorites, in fact. But anything else jump out to you, family friendly films to recommend, Samuel?
Yeah. So we have some great Disney movies on there. Like one of the first ones was Fantasia. We have Pinocchio. One of the last ones that I wrote about for the original 100 was The Incredibles. So we have those ones, but to point out some ones that may not be as familiar. One that I had mentioned before, The Reluctant Saint, about St. Joseph of Cupertino. It was done by a lesser known director. He had done B movies prior to that, but he was Catholic. His name's Edward Dmytryk. And it's starring Maximilian Schell as Joseph of Cupertino. And it's one of my family's favorite movies. But the thing that is so striking about it is that I would call it one of the rare saint comedies that just balances, finds the humor in Joseph of Cupertino's innocence in a very unique way. But also it's not ridiculing. It's you're following him as he's living in the beginning of the film with his mother. And he's not, that great at school. He only just got his diploma, and he's I don't know, in his 20s. And as you maybe know, Joseph Cupertino is the patron saint to pray for struggling students. And then through a circumstance, including his mother kind of pushing him to do it, but also his uncle is the prior at the Franciscan Abbey, which he joins. He becomes a Franciscan friar, and he's assigned almost immediately to the stables because they figure, there's nothing else he can do. But then he ends up everyone who comes into contact with him while he's at the stables, including this one bishop in a great scene, great comedic scene halfway through the film, is just so touched and moved by his simplicity and by his humor and by his good nature. So much so that the bishop immediately says, "Make this man a priest," and everyone else is kind of shocked. And he's like, "Okay." And but it's this really well done portrait of a saint, just with all their human flaws, but also you see the true love that they have for Christ, that really made them who they are. So fantastic film, really funny film, but also there's a lot of pathos to it. The ending of the film makes me cry every time I see it, but I won't spoil it. Another film that jumps out is Lilies of the Field, starring Sidney Poitier, where he's this lone traveler who comes to find shelter with these German nuns out in California. And then they kind of convince him to stay there initially to teach like them English, but also to build a chapel. They had this ambitious plan to build a chapel, as they said, to build a chapel. And Sidney Poitier, not Catholic, barely. Well, the character he plays is his name Homer Schmidt, is barely Catholic, like barely religious at all, but ends up finding himself after he's been wandering for so long, working with these nuns. And it's a really just beautiful story of how he incidentally ends up bringing this town together. Great family film. Highly recommend.
Yeah, Samuel Morales is with us, 100catholicmovies.substack.com. Yeah, I've seen Lilies of the Field multiple times, and very charming film. The St. Joseph Cupertino film, I gotta say, I have not personally ever seen it. I know my family did watch it and loved it. My wife watched it with the kids one day, and they all loved it, and I wasn't able to view it, but yeah, that's one that's got to be on the list. And there's a lot of films like that I haven't seen. One I just saw a couple weeks ago, The Scarlet and the Black. Never saw that before. That is a wonderful little film as well. We're going to be right back. Stay tuned. Back to The Simple Truth. Jim Havens here with our guest today, Samuel Morales, 100catholicmovies.substack.com. We're talking about the 100 movies every Catholic should see. You can find the whole list over at 100catholicmovies.substack.com. We're going to get back into the discussion in a moment. But first, if you are buying or selling a home, there is an easy way to help the Station of the Cross at the same time. Real Estate for Life has 1,400 experienced, morally grounded agents in the U.S. and Canada. Visit realestateforlife.org to find a Christ-centered, experienced realtor near you. And don't forget to mention the Station of the Cross. And you know what? Let's open up the phone lines as well. If anybody does want to call in and ask anything about movies, film, a Catholic worldview, and movies, your favorite movie, your favorite family-friendly film that you want to recommend to everybody, whatever it is, feel free to give a call in, 1-877-511-5483. That's 1-877-511-5483. And the name of that film about St. Joseph Cupertino that Samuel was recommending in the last segment, The Reluctant Saint, 1962, The Reluctant Saint. So you can check that one out. And there is so much that is on the list. You did mention the Terrence Malick film Tree of Life, which I also love. I was blown away when I first saw it, so much so that I'm going back to the theater to see that again, which I did. And even though it clocks in, I think at like 3 hours or something, there was something there that I'm like, I need to spend a little bit more time with this. There's so much that to think about, to reflect on. It's kind of a little microcosm in a way of really, I think you get into the fall of man in there and many things. But I think that was one of the main things that really jumped out to me is sort of the Genesis story, the fall of our first parents, and subsequently each of our stories. And we all, sort of have a time of a loss of innocence and a sort of tragic fall that occurs to some degree, and in coming into this life, and interesting to reflect on that. And thanks be to God that we have a Redeemer, our Lord Jesus, and His Catholic Church that He died to give us, so that we can we can enter into the sacramental love, sacramental life of our Lord poured out for us in His Catholic Church. Just so incredibly blessed. The magisterial teachings, He's given us so much. So thanks be to God. And so that movie helps to, I think, kind of reflect on a lot of deeper things, as well as Terrence Malick's film that came subsequently after that, on Blessed Franz Jägerstätter, which the name is escaping me, A Hidden Life. And that's also a very beautiful film. Now, it doesn't show Blessed Franz's Catholic sense as much. It doesn't draw it out explicitly as much as I would have liked, just because he was such an explicitly Catholic man. When you read his writings, he's so concerned about living the feast days and the Holy Eucharist and all of this. You don't really explicitly get any of that in A Hidden Life, but a beautiful film nonetheless. And again, I want to recommend Triumph of the Heart out at the theaters right now, wherever you see movies. Try to find that Triumph of the Heart, St. Maximilian Kolbe. Again, a lot of influence of Terrence Malick there. A very beautiful film that again exceeded my expectations for sure. So Triumph of the Heart, that is out now. Samuel, anything else? I want to make sure that I'm giving you enough time to speak to any other film you want on this list for us today.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, Tree of Life is my favorite film. The first time I saw it, I watched it 3 different times that year because, like, I watched it once by myself, and then I showed my family, and then I showed some of my friends. I was just blown away by it. And I still, like, I don't even know if I fully comprehended it, but the story is so beautiful, and just the way it shows memory, because it's essentially an autobiographical film about Terrence Malick, because who also grew up in Texas where the film was shot, and it shows that time period of his childhood, and just, yeah, it's just very deeply personal film to him, and just of showing childhood and the way of nature and the way of grace, as is often whispered throughout the film, of like him being caught between the goodness of his mother and the ambition of his father, whom he both loved in different ways. But yeah, Tree of Life, Hidden Life is on there. I almost wanted to add another Malick film to the list, but we're trying to make room for other filmmakers. So yeah, just to highlight some of the stuff we're doing now, we have gone through, we've done series of 5 for each of these filmmakers of 5 movies. So we started with John Ford, then did Akira Kurosawa, and then did Hitchcock. And now we are doing silent comedies. So we're looking at Harold Lloyd, Chaplin, Buster Keaton. So I'm on deck for this week to write the post. So stay tuned for that. So yeah, we're currently working on continuing the list and just continuing to work on our podcast, getting cool guests. Like recently, the last guest we had was Joseph Pierce. And then eventually starting a series for a podcast on just going through the list. So we've recorded 2 episodes already and have to, get going on the rest. But yeah, just it's been really fun to get back into our list and look at it and go in depth on it. So yeah, that's what we've got going on now.
Excellent. Samuel Morales, 100catholicmovies.substack.com. That's 100catholicmovies.substack.com. Now, I did notice what wasn't on the list, and there's really only one that I noticed not being on the list. It jumps out to me because it is a favorite of mine, but also because when you go to the kind of the standard American Film Institute AFI list, it's number 1, and that's Citizen Kane. Have you seen Citizen Kane? What are your thoughts on it? Again, I think it works much like The Godfather in a way, sort of a tragedy, but also, yeah, showing kind of that what I was speaking on the Tree of Life, that sort of poignant sense of the loss of innocence as well, which is so important in the life of the fictional character Charles Foster Kane. But it's a movie that it's difficult for young children to kind of make it too far through. I'd say high school students might begin to find it interesting. But I find it, I love it. I've probably seen it, I don't know, maybe 30 times by this point, but I think it's a fantastic film. Any thoughts on that? Have you seen it?
Yeah, no, I've seen Citizen Kane. Yeah, I like Citizen Kane. I'd probably be hesitant. Like, I don't know if I'm on the train that many people are on, that it's like the greatest film of all time. But that is something we definitely had talked about. And I'd say that's one that actually probably came pretty close, but ended up slipping the list. That we were like, at the end of the day, we're like, okay, this can go on the list later. But great film. I would agree with those themes. It's a tragedy, the rise and fall of Charles Foster Kane, and you just can pinpoint the moment where he loses his childhood and then gets into the newspaper industry and just everything, and then just kind of loses himself the ambition. And the whole film is just about this man who has a lost childhood, who never got to actually grow up. So fantastic film. Huge Orson Welles fan. But again, not every film that we wanted to get on the list made it. Sometimes it was more dependent on who could write for the week, but at the end of the day, yeah, didn't didn't make the cut. But again, like I'd say, this is not the 100 great. We do not call this 100 greatest films of all time. But these are simply 100 movies that we think every Catholic should see. Sure. So definitely would love to do a deep dive into Wells later as a series. So, and if we're doing that, absolutely Citizen Kane is going on there. And I have a friend who very much, that's one of his favorite films, and I will definitely be him to write on.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, I love the film. And I do think one of the reasons that it ranks so high on AFI's list is because of so many technical innovations that Orson Welles did in that film. Kind of bumps it up even more than just how it stands up on its own as a film. But yeah, it's a great one. And yeah, there, one thing I guess I wanted to ask you along these lines, there's something about the classic films, especially of a certain period. And I would say it would be the period when there was the code, where they had sort of this moral code, where there was even a Catholic priest that sat on the panel and said, no, you got to take that out. We're not going to let that go through. But it was a much more Catholic, I would say, not on the negative side, but there was something very positive about that. It wasn't censorship as much as it was, let's make sure that we're sending the right messages here. Now it would become a whole thing where people are slipping things in and coding things with symbolism that would, to try to get it past what they would call the censors, I guess, the panel of people that were looking at things. But it was a time where it was a more Catholic worldview in the culture. Bishop Sheen with the highest rated TV show, lots of things going on that were just more Catholic naturally in the culture. And I think that the films of that period, you find so many of them that they just fit a sort of Catholic worldview, whether the director intended it or not. He was just kind of breathing it in the atmosphere, and it's coming out in the way that they're creating art. Do you get that sense? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. So I would absolutely agree that it's a code. On our podcast, one of our first guests we had is a film historian. She has ties to Christendom College. Her name is Onalee McGraw. And she runs what is called the Educational Guidance Institute. And what she has been doing for the past couple of years is developing a curriculum of classic films that specifically can teach students films like A Raisin in the Sun, 12 Angry Men, Shane. Even the most recent film that she has on there is Remember the Titans. But I got to know her while I was working at Christendom College. And she just has so much to say on films, especially from that era, and on the Hollywood Code. It educated me on things that I didn't even know about the code. Like I knew there were limits put on sex and violence by the code, but I didn't also know that that it not only told you what you couldn't do, but also told you what you should do. And that is to promote certain values, certain family values, certain patriotic values. So that is all the more apparent to me in the films of such as like Frank Capra and filmmakers during that era like him. But even like films like Casablanca, which has such a powerful and classic ending. That's actually film number 99 on our list. That's the last film that I wrote on. The ending of, I don't want to spoil it, but the ending was going to be much different. And sort of, I'll just say the film originally was going to go the way you think it's going to go towards the end. Before the final twist, which is one of the greatest moments of cinematic history in my mind. But that was just influenced by the code to have a more moral ending for the characters. But it ends up being a more powerful ending of self-sacrifice in the end. So yeah, I would totally point. And you mentioned the 60s before. Like you just see, like even then, like after, like towards the end of the 50s, like television starts, it's become such a household item, and films, like the box office goes down, and the studios are like, "What do we do? What do we do?" And of course, that leads to them. For some reason, that the solution to that is, "Oh, let's ease up on the code," which just leads into this. You get some great art in the 70s, but a lot of the films are just like more like so much morally bankrupt content. You start having theaters like pornographic theaters and things like that. It just, despite all the, you know, the classics that we mentioned, like The Godfather, there's a lot of bad in the 70s. And then it's interesting because then you get Star Wars, which does lean back to those films from the era of the code, like when the code was enforced. And then you realize that, oh, wow, people were missing this. And I think you actually have something similar happen recently with Top Gun Maverick, which had those old school values that people were missing, those patriotic values, those heroic values that even in our time today, you see people still wishing films were made like that.
Yeah, great stuff here with Samuel Morales, 100catholicmovies.substack.com. If you want to get a call in, 1-877-511-5483. That's 1-877-511-5483. Yeah, Casablanca, I would say, is a bit of a miracle. The fact that that whole thing came together, the ending, everything ended up working. I mean, a film in general, such a collaboration. So much has to go right. But especially back then, I mean, they were pumping out so many films. It was like an assembly line. They didn't think Casablanca was going to be much. Ended up being a masterpiece. Rick Blaine, one of the greatest characters of all time. We'll be right back. Stay tuned. Welcome back to The Simple Truth. Jim Havens here with Samuel Morales, our guest today. 100catholicmovies.substack.com. That's 100catholicmovies.substack.com. We're going to get back into our discussion final segment here in just a moment. But don't forget about iCatholic Mobile, the only Catholic mobile phone company in the U.S. today. When you subscribe to iCatholic Mobile, you do help fund the Station of the Cross. Check out iCatholic Mobile, iCatholicMobile.com. All right, Samuel, you did mention, so I believe it is a podcast here. So you've got it here on the 100catholicmovies.substack.com website. Kind of looks like a blog post, but then I see it's an audio link as well. So I'm guessing this is a recent podcast episode that you did with Dr. Joseph Pierce. We had him on as well last week. He's a recurring guest on The Simple Truth. He's outstanding. Anything you want to preview for folks? What did you and Dr. Joseph Pierce talk about? What can they find in this podcast episode if they head on over and check it out at 100catholicmovies.substack.com?
Yeah. So the podcast, this episode, the Joseph Pierce episode, for 1 week, it is only open to paid subscribers. And then tomorrow drop over on our Spotify and Apple and Amazon. And it'll be unlocked on Substack to listen to. But just to give a preview, I studied literature at Christendom College. So I became very familiar with Joseph Pierce. I remember having his Ignatius Critical Edition of Huckleberry Finn and other classics while I was there. And I found his book, which is simply titled Literature, which is a guide for literature for Catholics. And he had come to speak at Christendom years before I was a student there, but I had seen clips of it. But yeah, we had him on. I reached out, and we talk a lot about just like adaptations, particularly the Lord of the Rings films, which he says often in his circles he is a defender of. We talked about unmade adaptations of things that he'd like to see, so not only including the Silmarillion, but also some of the works of Chesterton, which have yet to be adapted. And then we talk a lot of just simply about storytelling, and how it's good to have saint stories, but not all stories, particularly in literature. And we agreed in cinema should not necessarily all be hagiography, that it's important to show stories of humans who are sinners, who either, it's a tragedy and it's a war, it's a cautionary tale, or a story of good overcoming evil despite the struggle. So it's a really fun talk. He claimed several times that he was not a film buff, but as it turns out, he knows way more about film than he gives himself credit for. Also think worth checking out in his critical editions at the end. This also stirred my mind to reach out to him. Particularly, I remember looking at his critical edition of Julius Caesar, but in the back, he often lists adaptations of the book that you're reading, and he kind of just like gives his comments like, this one's not very good, this one has a great performance but misses, you know, this over here. So yeah, so I figured he'd be a good guest. So that will go live tomorrow on our Spotify and on our Substack. So for anybody to listen to. But yeah, podcast has been really awesome. So far, we've only got to interview one of the directors of one of our, because many of the filmmakers of our films are no longer with us, for particularly the older films, but we did get to interview Whit Stillman, who directed Metropolitan, which was really, really cool. He's not Catholic, but he's I believe Presbyterian. And we just get a blast to have on. Highly recommend listening to his episode, especially if you've seen Metropolitan or are a fan of Whit Stillman's work.
Interesting. Yeah, no. So this is a remake of a recent film, Metropolitan.
Yeah, so it's not as opposed to Metropolis, the
right.
Yeah, that's the 1920 silent film. Metropolitan was a comedy released in 1990. I think it was nominated for Best Original Screenplay, and it might have won. But yeah, it's just a film about this young man in the New York scene. It's kind of timeless. Like they talk almost like they're in the 1930s or 40s, like pretending to almost live this high society. And man kind of falls, you know, he's not got a lot going for him. He's living, you know, at home with his mom, and he kind of gets into it and discovers like there's a charm to it, but also realizes the hypocrisy of wanting to live this pseudo intellectual life. And it's just, yeah, it's very much feels like an Yves Lenoir novel in the same vein as Brideshead Revisited. But it's just a very well written. The dialogue is very sharp, comedy, kind of poking fun at intellectual circles that maybe Whit Stillman had encountered before, but also sort of being a window to nostalgia into a different time. But just very, very sharp, very witty, very enjoyable comedy. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, no, I never even had heard of it before. Metropolitan. I'll have to check that one out. One that did catch my eye as well on the list, a more recent film. I guess it's not that recent now, but from 2014, Interstellar. I know this film has jumped out to me as one that seems like a lot of people really, really like this film. I'm included in it, and anytime I kind of come across the film, it makes me want to watch a bit of it, and there's something about it. I think there is something in this story of the father and the daughter, and how this plays out over the length of the film. Obviously, whenever there's anything with respect to outer space and traveling through inner between stars, interstellar it's called, it's very cinematic in that sense, but also it does get a little bit towards the end very strange and kind of almost maybe a bit new agey. I remember when I kind of looked up the ending, like, what is this all about? And there's something interesting about it for sure, but then I think when I looked it up, it did sort of seem like it was intended as sort of kind of a new age type of deal. That didn't seem that great. But again, there's something about this film that really does seem to draw people in. Anything, did you write on this film in particular? Anything you want to say on Interstellar?
Yeah, I did. And sort of the thesis of what I came up with when I wrote on it, a large part of the film, and I should know that Christopher Nolan was raised Catholic. I don't know if he still is, but I think there's a lot you could actually glean from his work, from his Catholic upbringing. But what I found to be the thesis of the film is that love is a quantifiable force in the universe. And yeah, you can look at that in a new agey way. But I think the film is sort of about like, why do certain coincidences, what appear to be coincidences, happen in our lives? Like kind of where the film finds NASA to begin with, how how the entire trajectory of how he goes out to even attempt to save humanity, all the little things that happen, like books fall off a shelf, or there's this strange patterns in the dust, or things like that. And it turns out, it wouldn't necessarily be a spoiler because of how vague this is, but it turns out that the communications that Cooper has been receiving, what he thought maybe was from aliens and or somewhere else, turn out to be projected through the love that his daughter has for him, all the way out, all the way from where she's millions of miles away. And I think there's something to be said through the power of prayer and through providence that I don't even know if Nolan fully grasps what he's getting at. But just this idea that love is quantifiable force in the universe. And what is that ultimate force? It's God. He doesn't get fully there, but I think he gets halfway there. And I think that's what draws people in. I could say a lot more on it, but I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, fantastic. We can find the rest over at your review on 100catholicmovies.substack.com. Again, 100catholicmovies.substack.com. Samuel Morales, thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All right, great work. Again, 100catholicmovies.substack.com. God bless you all.